Welcome to our open book. Very good to be with you. I apologize if there's a sound of thunder and lightning in the back. Hi there, David Espacini, Chris Rauber, SR, Diana Lynch, Mr. Dickens, Dorothy Joy, Mark Nykirk, Jean May, Sally Simmerson, Mark Gladstone, Mary Ann Baumgartner, Peggy O'Brien, SR O'Brien, and Diana Lynch. Mary Ann, good to see you. Thank you. We've been reading from Neil Simon's memoirs. By the way, in the book that I have out currently, Ulysses S. Cat and Other Animals I Have Known, hi there, Sherry Shavitz, I talk about the fact that I once had a turtle named Neil Simon, or we named him Neil Simon. And my mother used to leave notes by the bolt saying, "I'm worried about Neil. He didn't write any plays today." Hi there, Diane Wood. I have been communicating with them. It takes some weathering. Yeah. They're not used to living that way in the northern climes of France. So, yeah, takes some getting used to. Hmm. And our friend, by the way, Liana Fink, uh, who's done the wonderful illustrations to Ulysses S. Cat. This is one of the mugs that she does. Isn't that nice? Artist commute. I love that. Trying to look the name of the store in New York, Fish's Eddy, Fish's Eddies. So thank you for being with us. So I'm going to skip around at the top just a little bit because Neil Simon is trying to complete Barefoot in the Park. Hi there, Karen Lockhart, and he's not satisfied with it. And he says to himself, "I'm in deep trouble. If only the phone would ring, offering me a way out." He writes, "There was a God, even if his name was Ernest Martin, who co-produced with his partner Cy Fewer such hits as Where's Charlie, Guys and Dolls, How to Succeed in Business." I've thought about that too. How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. I could go on from there. "I saw your Come Blow Your Horn," he said. "You write funny, you know that?" Now, this week I wanted to say, says Neil Simon, but I settled for a simple thank you. Cy and I just bought a book called Little Me. We wanted to do it as a musical. Do you think you can write it if you're interested? Well, of course I was interested. I thought it unwise to tell him I couldn't get past the first act of my second play, but there is always the possibility he and Cy could lead me by the hand through the intricate maze of writing a musical. So he reads the book. As he says here, Little Me was a pastiche written by Patrick Dennis, most famous for writing, I think, My Auntie Mame. Hi there, Trey. Very good to see you here. Nice to be with you. That's a wave, too. I'm sorry I'm wearing just a Second City t-shirt today. If I'd known you were watching, Trey, I would have had something more appropriate. Little Me was a pastiche written by Patrick Dennis, best known for Uncle May and Auntie Mame, the story of a starry-eyed girl who came from the wrong side of the tracks in a small Midwestern town and proceeded to marry 7 men, each one richer than the preceding one, who coincidentally or conveniently all die one after another, leaving Belle Poitrine wealthier after each passing. Neil Simon says, "I needed my Berlitz French-English book to translate Belle Poitrine into large breasts, and that will give you some idea of the tone of Mr. Dennis's books." It was funny, but it was book funny, not stage funny. It would take more than an adaptation. It would require an entirely new script. So he goes on, he talks to the producers and says, "I like the book. I'd like to try writing it, but you can't use 7 men to play or 7 husbands. Let's get 1 man to play them all and make it a star turn." They ask, "Who should that be?" Neil Simon says, "I can think of only one person, Sid Caesar." Now, of course, as he notes, I had worked for 3 years with Sid Caesar on television and knew his talents as well as anyone. They were prodigious. I also felt that Sid would be comfortable with me. The other attraction for me was that Bob Fosse was going to choreograph and co-direct with Cy Feuer. I knew Bob socially, but would have given anything to work with him. Bob had a wonderful but dark sense of humor that showed up in his work as well as his life. Hi there, Joan Denny. With the exception of Jerome Robbins, Fosse was the best choreographer who ever worked in the theater. Hi there, also, Elise. From the day rehearsals began, Fosse was the one I looked for guidance and inspiration. At 10 a.m. the first morning, the actors read the script, the composer sang the songs. Huge applause from everyone at the end. Actors, dancers, producers, scenic and costume designers, all in attendance, proclaimed the script was absolutely hilarious and the score the freshest heard on Broadway. I couldn't recall a single song from Little Me. And for all the while, I kept my eyes glued to Fosse's reactions. For me, his approval or disapproval was all that mattered. Bob Fosse worked out the dance numbers weeks before the show, went into rehearsal alone in a mirrored room with the pianist and his wife, Gwen Verdon, to help him flesh out the numbers. Bob and Gwen did everyone's part, 16 dancers or 20. No one was allowed in, but I would often stand outside the room just listening to the rhythms and to Bob and Gwen counting steps. What a memory. Once Bob allowed me to watch for a few minutes, I was mesmerized, as anyone would be when those two were moving together into a mirror room. Sid Caesar signed on, but with one caveat. Once we opened in small caveat, says Neil Simon. Once we opened in New York, he wanted to do a weekly half-hour television show, shooting it on his off day in the theater. This worried me, as it would worry any cardiologist. Why would people pay to see Sid Caesar when they could get him for free on Saturday night? Already the problem had started. On the second day of rehearsals, the choral director took the singing chorus of 12 into a separate room to go over one particularly difficult but rousing number. He stopped them every 8 bars to go over corrections and then continue. When he got to the end of the 32 bars, he clapped his hands for the chorus to stop, but one soprano kept belting away. Her eyes closed in rapture, caught in the gaiety and spirit of the moment. The director clapped his hand again and then called her name. She couldn't or wouldn't stop singing. Worriedly, he went to her, shook her arms, and called to her. The singing, now at almost a hysterical pitch, went on until others in the group silently left the room in embarrassment and for fear of her. Nothing stopped her. Finally, an ambulance was summoned and she was taken away for observation. Not a story, either, Heather Coles. Still singing as she crossed town. For all I know, she may still be at it some 30-odd years later. After an endless day of rewrites, we were ready for our first run-through. I was actually pretty proud of what I'd done, and that constant laughter by the cast reassured me that maybe we had something pretty funny. The first run-through brought out our first audience, small as it was, and included the spouses of producers and creative staff, and a few friends, maybe a dozen in all. I sat in the third row with Joan, his wife, as we've said, as the stage manager called curtain. There was no curtain to go up, just as there was no orchestra, as he called out overture. One piano and a few chairs will do for a run-through. It was amazing how much laughter came from those dozen viewers. The show breezed by, each number going well, each scene hilariously played by Caesar and company. God, how I love theater. How lucky I was to be a part of it. What a joy to look forward to spending my life in this glorious business. And then quite suddenly, sound of silence. Not from the stage, but from the 12 viewers who now sat in an unpredictably stony silence. We'd hit a dry patch so arid you could lay a beach blanket on it. Neil Simon writes, I quickly got out of my seat, walked to the back of the theater, sat on the steps to the balcony, and stopped listening to what was being said on stage. There was no point in listening to what I knew would never be in the show on and if there was an opening night. This was not like the cloud of fear that had come over me during the first production of Come Blow Your Horn. This was a clear recognition that we had just lost the audience. And we had lost them because of what I had written. Remember, this is Neil Simon. Neil Simon saying, because lost an audience because of what I'd written. I didn't know how to face Cy and Ernie and Bob and Joan. This was trouble, and I was too inexperienced to know that trouble was the norm for most musicals. No one said anything during the intermission, and I didn't give them much chance. I sat alone in the back in the shadows. The second act picked up the momentum thanks to a brilliant dance number that Fosse had created. Although we didn't have the laughs we had in the first act, the mini audience, either Scott Adams, came to life again, and there was hope and promise in Mudville that day. I sat up the whole night, writes Neil Simon, trying to examine where and why I'd gone wrong, and in the morning light filtered into the room. Despair suddenly turned into optimism, not because I knew how to fix it, but because I was now determined that I would fix it. Believe me, there is a very large barrier to get over, and you save the time you would use in being terrified and stuck, and put it to work in dealing with the various possibilities you could try in making it work. That's very sound advice. The first realization is that the concept of the scene is wrong, and then after many attempts, a promising concept appears. Once you've discovered that, the dialogue comes more easily. It begins to pump life, and it was once inert, inept, and in trouble. And I rewrote what seemed to be a vast improvement. We had our final run-through before leaving for Philadelphia. Is anyone coming to watch today? I asked Cy Fuhrer. Yes, he said, a friend of mine. One friend, that's all? He'll be enough. 5 minutes before the run-through started, a man walked in leaning on a cane despite his robust physique. It was John Steinbeck. In 1962, he'd been awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature. This was the closest I had come to meeting a great American writer. Steinbeck was a good friend of Cy and Ernie's, and I sensed he enjoyed the company and gaiety of those who worked in the theater, especially the musicals. Steinbeck had a voice that seemed to come from the bowels of the earth, and a persistent cough that made the journey along with it. The run-through began with everyone playing for this one man who sat on a metal folding chair, leaning on his cane, occasionally laughing or coughing. It was hard to tell which. When it was over, Cy and Ernie crossed to him and thanked John. Steinbeck smiled and squinted at Cy and Ernie, knowing full well about their nonstop string of hits, and he said, "It'll do. But remember, you can still only eat 2 eggs a day." It sounded like the philosophy of someone out of the Grapes of Wrath. He saw everything in life in those terms. We opened in Philadelphia to a great critical review, but somehow we all knew better. A couple of numbers didn't work. Well, the audience laughed more than we'd anticipated. There was still a feeling of emptiness at the end of the evening. As I walked along the streets with Cy Fiore the next morning, he suddenly broke into laughter. He said, "I've never been in this position before. We have a smash hit, and I'm thinking maybe we should close it." I know what he meant. The theater audience is a unique audience. All their laughter and all their applause doesn't always coincide with how they feel when the curtain goes down. All their cheers and bravos do not always turn into good word of mouth. They may be happy in the moment, but uninvolved on the way home. Something Cy said to me during this time has stayed with me forever, writes Neil Simon. Don't think about the good things in a show. The good things take care of themselves. It's the bad parts that'll do you in. With your permission, I'm going to end there tonight. Maybe we'll pick it up tomorrow. Tell me if that would be all right with you. How did little me become a star, become, with all those stars, become a hit when there were those ominous signs? We can see. Well, very good to be with everyone tonight. Let me know what you think. I can also come on with something else. It is harder to book um, the guest during the summer, but we were trying for all the obvious reasons. But we'll see what we can do. Hi there, Carla Atkinson. Didn't know you were with us. Always good. Yeah. Always good to have you join us. Always good to have all of you join us. So thanks very much for being with us tonight on our open book. I think you hear the sounds of a daughter in the background unloading a grocery cart. A grocery bag, I should say. So thanks for being with us tonight. I mean, it's interesting because let me just hold it one more time. Neil Simon's memoirs, you learn about the art of show business, and you also learn that it's show business. So thanks very much for being. Yeah. Thank you, Roger Greenbaum. Enjoyed your note. Thanks very much for being with us. Thank you, Klaatu. Yes, sounds of daughter. Take care. See you later. Bye-bye.